Good morning from Orkney, blue skies, March 2022. This is going to be a very short, concise overview of my PV renewable setup here on Orkney. Now, I put something on YouTube a while ago, one of the shorts, just asking you, my watchers, for questions about my setup that you'd like answering. So I'll run through them briefly. Duncree said, are solar panels worthwhile in Orkney? Yes. Rob Heap, thank you Rob. I'm interested in the Sunamp setup, please Jonathan. How does it differ from storage batteries? It's sort of about the same. I've got a 3.3 kilowatt array and a 4.8 kilowatt hour Moxa battery, Zappy, Eddie and Harvey, 39 kilowatt Kona and a Model 3. You're living the dream, mate. And you're living near Birmingham. Yeah, very nice setup. I'll show you the Sunamps. I'm going to show you all the bits of kit, but great to see you've got your setup. It's interesting when people get an EV, they then want renewables, or if they've got renewables, like solar panels or a wind turbine, they then want an EV. So EVs and renewables sort of go together, so that's great to hear. Jude Brown, thank you Jude. How are they holding up in the wind and snow? Fine. It blows a hoolie up here. I think December we had 80-mile-an-hour winds, and they peaked on the hills here at about mid-90s, so not budged an inch. They're just fine. And snow, we don't really get a lot of bad snow. I actually bought a very long window washing pole to remove the snow. Gutted that I've not been able to use it yet, but snow's not a problem. Why did you pick the Pylontec batteries? This is from Gary Smith. Thank you, Gary. Over the others, just because they're modular and you can just add to them. And yes, I do want more batteries, but don't tell Mrs. P. I just like them, and I've got advice from my very good Sparky friend Chris Wright, who's bought them and fitted them for me. So yeah, he's done his research, being a qualified Sparky, and he likes the Pylontec setup, so that's what I went with. John here, thanks John. Hi mate, when do you use the batteries? Do you simply fill them with solar and then discharge them into the car's appliances, or is it smarter than that? It's smarter than that, John. Great thing about storage batteries is that when the sun isn't doing this thing in the sky, you know, if it's a really dull day and I'm only pulling a few hundred watts, then the storage batteries are still brilliant, because I can pick my cheap overnight Octopus Go tariff to charge the batteries. It's not just for EVs. Now Octopus know this, you know, you can put your dishwasher on, your tumble dryer, washing machine at between half 12 and half 4 in the morning, 5p unit. Now I know prices are going to fluctuate, but that's what I'm paying as of now, because my 12-month contract with Octopus started in October, and that's what I got, 5p. So it's not just simply to store this stuff from the sun today, it's also to pull energy off the grid when it's really cheap, and then use it in the house when it's very expensive on the grid. It just gives you so much more flexibility. That's what I love about storage batteries. Philip Melling, have you thought about adding a small wind turbine? Yes, I have. The ones I've seen around here, sort of the smaller ones, are quite noisy, and I'm just thinking if I bolted it to a big pole on the end of my house, what's the noise going to be like? I've not totally ruled it out. Again, my friend Chris Wright, the Sparky, he's bought a couple of 500 watt turbines and he's doing some experiments, so I'll see what he comes back with. But I'm interested to find out what the noise level's like, because it is so quiet up here. On a windy day, I don't want a wind turbine throbbing through the house. So jury's out about that, but I would like one. What's Phil Blair? Phil Blair, I know Phil Blair. Hope you're enjoying life in Cornwall, Phil. Thanks for your question. What size solar array are you using? 9.2 kilowatts. I've got 2 inverters. Have you got 2 solar arrays? No. So the top row of 10 panels, as you can see there, they were the original second-hand ones I bought. So that's on a 3.6 kilowatt inverter that will dump onto the grid if I can't use everything. The other 20 are on my hybrid inverter, but I'll explain more about that when I show you my inverters in my cupboard near the front door. Are they standalone or do they work together? They work together, and you've asked, is one for the battery and one for the general house? No, they all sort of work together, but again I'll explain that in my layman's terms, because Phil Blair is a very accomplished electrician, so he probably knows more than me, but I'll tell you in JP terms in a minute. Jeff Harrop, do you feed any excess electricity back into the grid, or is the system standalone? I'm not sure if you have many power outages. Yes, we do. We do get quite a few power cuts here because of the wind. If there's a real bad storm, the grid might go down. I'd say in the winter, on a really bad couple of months of winter weather, we might have a power cut perhaps once a fortnight for maybe 10-15 minutes, sometimes 3 or 4 hours. It all depends. But I do want to have a standalone. Now at the moment I lack what's called an earth rod and the associated equipment, so that when we do have a power cut, my house can power itself from my storage batteries. At the moment, because of the way power is set up, I need the grid earth in order to draw the energy out of my batteries, and obviously when there's a power cut they have to isolate all the renewables, so that's batteries, solar, wind. They all have to be isolated so the people working on the power lines don't get frazzled. But with some clever new tech, basically a very fast micro switch, it can isolate the house from the grid so I can still run the house. That requires an earth rod. I'm waffling on, but the earth rod is my next thing that's going to be installed. I don't feed back into the grid for any feed-in tariff. It's a paltry amount now. Not interested in the feed-in tariff. I'm just interested in being greedy to hang on to all the power myself, hence my battery storage. Let me just see if there's, and I've covered the backup, yeah. So Stephen Miller, with a battery as part of the system, how much you would be able to charge an EV? Well, as much as I want. So my Pylontec batteries, they will push out around about 6 kilowatts, and my car will ask for 7. So if I was to charge through the night, that's what they draw out. But on a day like today, if I plug the car in, it's not here at the minute, my wife's gone out in it. If I plug the car in, it'll balance between charging the batteries and charging the car, however I've set it up on the Zappy. Basically, how many, you're asking as well, Stephen, for example, the e-Nero, how many miles of range would it provide? Well, as much as I put in, to be honest. My e-Nero's returning around 4 miles per 1 kilowatt hour of energy, or 1 unit. So yeah, there was one day recently, it was a day like today, I plugged it in, it filled the batteries, it filled my Sunamps, and I put 60 miles into the car. So yeah, going back to the first question, solar works on Orkney. Final question of these 12, Russell Gilchrist. Thank you, Russell. I was just wondering when you'd installed it, and did it work straight away, or did you have to program set it up before it worked, and have you modified anything since? The first row, the first 10, I think that total of 3.6 kilowatts was a second-hand system I bought off Facebook of all places about 4 years ago. So second-hand panels, second-hand rails, second-hand inverter, all the cabling, bought it for £2,000. Myself and the electrician fitted it, and a builder who lives over there, he helped me fit the rail to the roof. So that was the first bit, without any storage, and then it just then becomes an obsession. I just warn you now. So as the cost of the panels has dropped, I think these panels, they're about 330 watt each. I've got 20 of them. They were just over £100 each. So the cost of panels has dropped considerably. So I've just added to it, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to add to it even more by getting an earth rod and switchgear set up soon. So again, modifications, loads of little mods. Initially I had 4 Pylontec, and now I've doubled that to 8. And you know, I could possibly have some more. That's a great thing about Pylontec, is they're modular. Anyway, they're the questions that I've answered from the YouTube questions. So without me waffling on anymore, do you want to go and see my setup? Let's go and have a look. So there's my setup. We've faced bang on south. So I've got 30 panels, totaling 9.2 kilowatt. This is our heating, air source heat pump, so air to air source. So it's a Panasonic unit, and it is 2.73 kilowatt. That's the sort of rating of it. At full pelt, it's just under 3 kilowatts, and that heats our whole house. I'll show you the other bits of the units inside in a minute. So that's our heating. This is my Sunamp setup. So this is using phase change materials. I'll put a link in now of the video I did about these. And I've also got the Eddy, which I just go back, there we go. So you can see it doing its thing. So 1.7 coming off the roof, the other bit will be going into the battery, but at the minute I'm putting 1.1 kilowatts back in to these units that provide the hot water. So there's 3 units, and again the video that I'll put a link in will explain how they work, and that was really effective. These are really nice and cold. Sometimes these pipes get a bit warm, you know, they're quite warm there, but they're all linked in together. Provides all our hot water. The controllers there, and my Eddy, which diverts everything. So that's our hot water. So everything else in the house, the stuff that we all use, got the old fridge, got instant sort of 1 cup hot water thing, and the other base load we've got. Well, the base load is this oil fired, well, not oil fired, it's oil filled, but it's electric towel rail. This is on 24/7, it never goes off because it just provides some heat in the bathroom. This is our air source heating. We've got 2 of these. We've got one here and we've got one in the living room. So there, that is our heat source. We don't have any underfloor heating, no wet system, no radiators. And this is my favourite bit of the house. So there's my Pylontec. They're 3.5 kilowatts each, and all the associated gubbins. So we've got 2 inverters. So that does the top row. So this will push out 3.6 kilowatts maximum to the grid if I'm not using the energy. So we've got two inverters. That normal inverter, and this is a hybrid inverter. So let me show you what's happening at the minute. We've got on the bottom section the 20 panels. There's just over 5 kilowatts coming off the roof, and the top ones I've got 2.4. So that's 7.2. You see it on the camera? 7.2 coming off the roof now at this moment in time. So when the sun isn't shining, as you can see as well, that's measuring the storage batteries. We charged up overnight to around 40%, and then in the morning, you know, boiling the kettle, making breakfast, having a shower, they would have topped up the sun amps till the sun comes out. So I got down to about 34% this morning at about 9 o'clock. Already by 10:30 I'm up to 75%. Got a little dongle here which actually communicates with an app, which I'll show you in a minute. But the great thing about this Solace inverter is that I can tell the inverter when to pull off the grid when it's really cheap to fill the batteries if it's going to be a dull day. So I'm constantly looking at the weather just to see what the weather's going to do the following day, so I don't have to unnecessarily charge these off the grid even though it's only 5p, because if I know it's going to be a sunny day the next day, I'll let this get really low, and then next day obviously I can fill just off on solar. Now I misjudged last night. I should have turned the timer off on this. I didn't. So in next to no time I'm going to fill these batteries. Now if they get full, and my wife is out at the moment with the car should be there, and then with the car I can obviously fill up from the Zappy. But with the car not being here, I'm going to run out of battery storage and I'm going to end up dumping on the grid. So when that happens, those 20 panels and this inverter will shut down, and then this inverter will dump a maximum of 3.6 kilowatts onto the grid. The other great thing that we've fitted, because these do create a fair amount of heat, now that is quite hot, which is normal, and there's obviously a heat sink at the back of the inverters as well, is we've fitted a little bathroom extractor fan just to suck some of the hot air out of this cupboard so we don't get things too hot. And again, my electrician Chris very cleverly reverse engineered this room start, so when the temperature rises too much here, this clicks on, so it's like backwards to a normal room start. Normally when it gets too cold they click on, but this clicks on when it gets too hot and activates just that fan, which just sucks out some of the warm air. So the other thing to show you, of course, we get an app. So we've got an app for the Solace app, which comes from this dongle. The reason I like this app is it does tell me the state of charge actually in the battery at the minute. Now it's a bit laggy. In fact, let me just clear that and start it again, because my panel's saying 76%. There we go. So it's showing 75% on the app, and it just shows you basically where the energy is coming from. But the reason I like the app is that I can actually see the state of charge without actually having to come to the inverter to see. And then of course we've got the My Energy app as well, which again, because of the way it's set up, it will only register what's coming through AC and not DC. So unfortunately this is a bit inaccurate as regards how much is coming out of the renewables. So even at night when I'm running on the Pylontec, that will show us green generation, although of course it's not, it's stored energy. So I do believe My Energy have got a new app coming out soon which hopefully will address that. But what is nice to see is things such as that. So that's when I charged up overnight. So that big chunk there is a combination of the Sunamps charging overnight at 5p, and also where it says home, that was me charging the Pylontec between 12:30 and 4:30 in the morning. And then again from 4:30 onwards it turns green because it's just seeing the energy coming out of the Pylontec and not coming off the grid. So it's good from that respect. Could be a lot better, I know, but the reason I like looking at this is obviously I don't want to see any I don't want to see any yellow at all. So if we just look back to yesterday, which was a pretty dull day. So again, yesterday there's a combination of using the stored energy. It ran out around about 5 p.m. and then I was running off the grid. But some days it's just been phenomenal. Let me just show you this month. There we go. So what I don't ever want to see is the yellow. So over a month I've only exported 11 kilowatt hours, but I've actually consumed and generated, as you can see there, the numbers. It doesn't quite tally up, but basically 50% of my energy was either off the solar or at 5p. So still quite a few savings there. So I like the app. It could be a lot better and I will improve on it, but basically I can see when I'm dumping on the grid, which I never like to see. So there you go. Hope that's been helpful. But if you're thinking of getting some Pylontec, I thoroughly recommend it. Anyway, let's go back outside just to finish off. Oh, so there you go. Hope you enjoyed that little tour around my setup here on Orkney. If you're thinking of renewables, if you're thinking of solar panels, just do it. And then I can see the comments now, oh, it's all right for you, you know, you've got money to burn, I'm on the breadline, and it is expensive, but it is my passion. I just enjoy it. The technology just really interests me. regularly get asked, well, what's the return on investment? You know, and people say, you know, maybe it's someone who's 40, they're going to say, well, it's going to take me 30 years to get it back, so it's not worth it. It's hard to quantify what your return on investment is if that's what you're focusing on. But just bear this in mind, you know, when I first started with this system, electricity was relatively cheap, and that was only 4 years ago. We all know what electricity and fuel prices have done since. So to sit down with a pencil and a calculator and paper and try and work out to the penny your return on investment and how many years, I don't think you can honestly do it, because who knows what the price of electricity is going to be in the next 6 months, let alone 6 years. So, you know, just do it, because prices will only just continue to go one way, in my opinion. And as regards return on investment, it just interests me. It's a bit like buying a new flash TV. You know, do you ever say, well, what's the return on investment? Well, of course you don't, because it's just a TV. When you buy a car, electric, any sort of vehicle, do you suddenly say, well, what's the return on my investment? How much are you going to save on bus fare by having a car? You don't, because you want a car. I wanted renewables. It interests me. It's my hobby. So, you know, return on investment, if you really want to know, it's just going to be quicker than I calculated very roughly because of prices. And filling the E-Nero, I think it was last June, July, my electricity bill was £7. £4 was standing charge, so my bill for the month in June was £13. That ran the house. That's the heated towel rail, the heating, the hot water, the lights, the cooking, putting it in the storage batteries, and putting 800 miles into my E-Nero cost me £13. So 800 miles in a normal car, what will that cost you? So you start, it's hard to quantify what your payback time is, but when you lump everything together, you know, I can see me getting my money back. Well, people have been saying the average household bill is perhaps going to be £3 a year. By my reckoning, after 4 or 5 years, I think I will have paid for this, because I've spent around about £16,000 on this setup, which over the next few years will continue to decrease. The price of panels is coming down, although of late, because of demand, I think the prices of panels may go up, but the actual materials to make these is getting cheaper all the time, as is lithium-ion batteries as well. If you're thinking of doing it and you can afford to do it, first thing is, don't overstretch yourself, of course, but insulate your home. The reason it works here for me, it's a boring house, to be honest, but it is so cheap to run. It is so toasty and so well insulated that the heat source pump works really well, and it doesn't require a huge amount of energy to make it work. So there you go. That was a rather long conclusion. If you have been watching, thank you. If you fancy subscribing, that'd be great. But leave a comment below. Appreciate your input. But I'm here just to say what's possible. I'm not here to brag that I can afford this and I've done this. But at the end of the day, it reminds me of mobile phones in the mid-80s. Mobile phones were horrendously expensive. And I can imagine people in the mid-80s saying, do you know what, I'm just going to go to the call box and push in my 2p's, because I don't need a fancy mobile phone that costs thousands and thousands of pounds. I'll just go to a normal call box with a normal phone with a cord on the end. And look where we are now, 40 years later. You know, people are now doing away with a landline and just relying on a mobile phone. So the technology is going to get better and cheaper and more accessible in the years to come. I've just jumped on early because it just interests me. All right, I'm going. Thanks for watching. See you next time.